is to um, make sure that that looks a little bit better. Um, Again, we just do a little bit more, and however smooth you want it to look is however many times you want to extrude it. I mean, I could select all this and just put a smooth modifier on it if I really wanted to. If I really wanted to just crank up that poly count, I could do that. But I don't really want to. I want to keep control of what I'm doing here. Um, Now, normally when you do um, high poly definition stuff like this, you would go into like ZBrush or Mudbox in order to um, really um, build in that detail at a very high poly, and then you could normal map it to this, and then it would look like it has that geometry when it doesn't actually have it. So we could have that really tiny 89 tries that we had earlier, or 289 tries that we had earlier, instead of like thousands of polys. But let's just focus on what we're doing here. You'll notice that these edges don't quite line up properly, right? Um, and you want them to because that looks better and it is easier to texture. And if this were to be deformed in any way, if we were to deform it later, we're not going to because it's just a sword. Swords don't really deform anyways. Um, then you want that nice even flow. Let's just pull this out just a little bit. So now we have our jewel. This is our jewel. And obviously texturing will go a long way with this. But um, this is what we have. This is round. Once we mirror this, this will look round, and it'll be on the other side as well, so it'll be mirrored. Um, and let's cut in this geometry here that you see here with this sort of rounded Art Deco kind of thing going on. Um, Now this is where it gets a little tricky. You see how I didn't really account for that when I was working on this. What you would normally do is you would think about how you want that edge topology to go into all of your other topology that you're working on. And I didn't really think about that. So we're gonna have to be creative with this, and we're gonna have to decide how many polys we actually want to add to this. And you'll see that it actually connects into this round jewel. Now, if I wanted to, I could cut in all the way and slip it all the way right into this last poly right here and make it super round. But we don't really want to do that. I mean, that's a ton of polys that will just become an issue. So let's do this. Let's add in a ring of polys. Now, what I did here is I just aligned this with the grid. So when I mirror this, this is going to be on the other side. It's going to cut off at this triangle, or at this vert right here every time, which is so handy. Like, I'm not even gonna, like, that is the kind of topology that you want, because it will be clean and easy. So now I have this vert here that I can mess with. Um, let's get rid of this edge and redo it to go against here. So now what this will let us do is one more cut inside here. We can grab these verts and pull them in. And now we have that detail. We have that detail right there. That will be it. And of course we can texture that again, and we can make that look all nice and pretty. Um, let's try to pull these verts in a little bit actually, and try to give it a little bit more of a roundedness to it. And then all we have to do now is um, add more geometry around the side in the exact same manner. Let's say I wanted to do it there, to kind of get cut off that weird sort of sharp edge that we have there that we probably don't really want. And at this point, it just becomes a matter of cutting in and cleaning up. If you make a mistake with this tool, you can just hit backspace to undo what you did. Again, that's the split polygon tool. I'm going to try and say it as often as possible so you won't forget, because they can be kind of annoying to remember what they are and stuff. So now we're starting to get in these little ridges. Let's try and pull these back a little bit to give it a little bit more of a actual feel of depth going on here. There we go. Starting to look pretty good here. Now, what we can also do is we can add more detail. We already sort of have it with this one here, so we don't have to worry about that one, but what we can do is we can just add in here. Now be careful when you do this, because you have to think about how much is going to be portrayed throughout the texturing, and if I just all willy-nilly throw it right here, that is weird triangle in the middle of a quad, and sometimes that's okay. For instance, if we were to unwrap it with this entire side facing out, then we won't have an issue. But let's say that that kind of weird poly setup was going to be on something that deforms a lot, or something that has a different angle to it. Um, then you might have an issue, because then those polys and tris won't show up just right on your UV set. So you'd have to redo them, or you'd have a hell of a time making sure that when you paint your textures, that those textures don't come out with seams in the middle and shit, and just look terrible. So keep that in mind when you're working on stuff. So, but if you look here, let's say we look at it like this, now you can start seeing that we actually have a sort of shape here, and it's not exactly pretty or precise. I'm not exactly being careful with this, so to speak, but this is something. And if you wanted this kind of, you can see that those lines that we added in don't really show up in this kind of view, so we don't have to really worry about them, um, as long as we can disguise how they're cut off, how they're tied off at. Um, so what you can do here, let's say I wanted to fix this up a little bit. You could just pull stuff in bit by bit, which is really the only way that you're really able to do it. You really just have to be patient with it and make sure that you can do it and clean things up the way that you wanted to. Um, and a lot of it is just seeing what works best for what you're working on. And like this, I want that to be a little bit more clean. And we can just continue adding in more and more geometry. Um, let's say we want one more right here. Now, obviously, we're really racking up triangles here. We're already at 175, and this is just a fourth of a sword here. So really, I mean, you don't need this kind of detail all the time. But I'm just showing it to you so you can understand how the general process would be for if you wanted to add in detail like this. So really what it comes down to is how much do you want to do with polys and how much do you want to do with texturing. And that really comes down to personal preference and, well, and your budget, really, is what it really comes down to. Budget. I mean, you can't have a 5,000 poly sword in like a PSP game or something. Um, yeah, I believe the limits for um, PSP games is something like 600 for the main character. That's triangles, 600 triangles for the main character, 200 for his weapon, and something like um, a, 1,000 for the environment, which is not a lot of triangles at all. Obviously, I mean, um, this is already 184 triangles, and this is for a sword, so we're already reaching the limit if we were doing a PSP game. So that's something to consider is what you're making these polys for. Now, most high-end games for consoles nowadays can do stuff like 350,000 polys or triangles um, on the screen at once. I'm pretty sure the PS3 and the Xbox 360 can both reach that amount pretty easily. Um, so what you have to consider is how much do you want to um, how much do you really want to show off with your items? I mean, with this and with that kind of poly budget, we could totally do this. We could go through and completely make this thing super high detailed if we wanted. Um, but let's just see how this looks now. I have completed the entire hilt here. It's not exactly beautiful, but it'll work. And here we go. This is our sword. You can see that it looks really robotic because um, I didn't really smooth out the circle here. It looks really weird and mechanical. Um, so you'd have to take that into account, and you would have to go in here and you can fix these polys, pull them out a little bit to make it look a little bit less like it was, you know, made to look like this, and more like it's just a cool sword. Um, but that's all up into that becomes personal preference. I mean, when you have this many polys, it comes down to how pretty do you really want it to look. This is 676 tries. This is our sword. One last look at it before we stop. Um, and I believe that's all we're going to cover today. Um, and eventually we can show off doing texturing and stuff. But this is it. Alright. Thanks for watching.